In this video, I want to go over some quick wins or quick tips in SketchUp, especially if it's your first time using it. Obviously, I'm not going to cover everything because it'd be a super long video, but just looking at my own workflow and how I use SketchUp, I want to point out some of the key things that I like to use. So the first thing we want to do when you open up SketchUp is adjust the way it looks, the interface, the toolbars, the style. So we'll start by adjusting our toolbars. If you go to View, you can select Toolbars, and here we can turn on and off all the toolbars that we want. For starters, I like to shut off the Getting Started toolbar, turn on the Large Tool Set, and then you can see here, I go through and I turn on a couple more, including the sandbox tools, the section tools, shadow tools, the layer tool, just the standard styles, views, and warehouse. And in general, these are going to be the ones, or really the only ones that you need. For now, we're just going to stick with the default tools in SketchUp, and in the next video, we'll go on to actual extensions. The next thing you can do is if you go to Preferences, you can go to Workspace, and you want to deselect Use Large Tool Buttons. This is going to give you a lot more workspace, and once again, it's going to make the SketchUp window look a little bit less goofy because the icons are just unnecessarily big with the default settings. Now we're going to look at the default tray on the right-hand side of the screen. You notice that there's a Layers tab, and what I like to do is make a new tray just for my layers. And you do this by going to Window, New Tray, and you can just name it Layers or whatever, and then only select Layers. And if you hit Add, it's going to create that new tray, and it's going to put it on top of the default tray. But if you click and drag, you can actually drag it off, and now you have a tray that's always going to be showing your layers, so you don't have to worry about trying to organize the default tray and opening and closing tabs to get to your layers, because that's something that you probably always want to have open. And obviously you can customize your trays however you'd like, but I think it's something that a lot of people forget that you can actually do. Now we want to change this gross green and blue default SketchUp style. So to do this, we're going to create our own style by clicking the Create New Style button up in the top right-hand corner of the style window. And then the first thing I like to do is go to Edit and shut off the profiles. Typically this will slow down models, and they're not necessary unless you're actually exporting line drawings. Next, we can edit a few more things. For example, this, we can change the color of the inverse side of a face. This is the way SketchUp tells you that a face is inside out. And it's usually like this gross gray blue color, so I usually like to lighten it up and make it more of a true blue. Now we can adjust the background color. You can choose if you want to have a sky and a ground, but for me, I typically just like to have one solid color for the entire background, gray usually. And then you can go into further detail, and you can choose what color your selection box is. You can choose what color an object is if it's locked. But something I do like to change is the section fill. The default is a black, but it's hard to differentiate between the actual section cut lines and the cut itself. So I usually like to make it a lighter gray so that you get a better idea of where the actual section cut outline is. But once again, all this you can fiddle around with and get it to look exactly how you want. So now once you get your style settings the way you want, if you right click on the style you just created, it'll give you an option to save as, and it'll take you to your SketchUp styles folder. You can just name it whatever you want. And once you save it, you'll always be able to load it into your SketchUp model. No matter what template you choose, you can just click here and then choose Open or Create a style, and you can select the SketchUp Styles folder, open it, and it'll come into your window. But if you do want to set it up so that you don't have to actually manually open it. You can save this as a template. So in order to do that, you want to delete everything in the SketchUp window. And then if you go to File, you can choose Save as Template, and then you can just name it whatever you want. And once you save this, whenever you open up SketchUp, it'll ask you what template you want to use, and you can just select this one. You can also choose to make this your default template, so you don't have to worry about having to select it. And saving templates will save everything from the style you have selected to the unit of measurement that you have chosen. So just keep that in mind whenever you're making a new template. So now I want to touch briefly on the modeling properties inside SketchUp. And this is pretty much the most important rule if you're using SketchUp, and that's to group or component every single thing that you model. And this is because you can see here I'm playing around with these two shapes, and whenever you draw something in SketchUp without grouping it, it sticks to everything else that's in the model. So you should never have a SketchUp model that has open groups or objects that aren't grouped. Everything should have its own group or component set to it. So now I just want to show you the difference between an open object, a grouped object, and an object that's a component. So you can see here, once you have a grouped object, if you select it, obviously it's going to select the entire thing versus just like one face. It's very simple. Pretty much every 3D software where you can group is like that, just as you would expect it. Now this third one I made into a component, and the biggest difference between a group and a component is that if you make a copy and you edit one of them, it's going to edit all the same components. And you'll find this is probably one of the most powerful tools in SketchUp, the component feature, because of how simple it is to create one and edit one without having to go through the steps of making like a Rhino block or a Revit family, whatever. It's just very simple. And then once you understand the properties of components and groups, you can actually nest components and groups inside of other components and groups. So you can see it can get actually pretty complex. But once you understand the basic format of groups and components, you'll find that it'll actually really help you start to organize the way you model your project. When you're modeling in SketchUp, the two tools you'll use the most are the push-pull tool, which is exactly what you think it'd be. Whenever it allows you to push and pull faces whenever you have them selected. And the other tool will be the move tool, which is right next to the push-pull. And obviously it allows you to move objects, but it'll also allow you to move edges, faces, points, whatever you want. And this is really going to be the primary means of how you edit geometry inside SketchUp. Almost every tool in SketchUp has kind of hidden features that are really useful for efficient modeling. For instance, the push-pull tool, if I want to make this extrude 25 feet, I just click once, type in 25 feet, hit enter. And now if I double click on these faces, it's going to remember that I entered that value, and it'll automatically extrude this face 25 feet. And you can start to understand how useful that is, especially if you're doing a repetitive sequence of modeling. Just like the push-pull tool, the move tool also has some very useful hidden features. The first one is very simple, and you'll use it all the time, is if you grab an object to move it, if you push Control, it'll actually give you a copy. This is sometimes in other programs, it'll be Alt. But if you want to make an array of a copy, say you want this box to be 15 feet in front of this one, you just move it, type 15 feet, hit enter, and then if you don't do anything else, you can multiply the amount of boxes that you have in that array just by typing X, whatever number you want. So you gotta just make a quick array of 30 objects. You can see how this is very efficient and very easy to make arrays of objects. And the second part to this is actually dividing a length by a certain amount of objects. So if you move this box from one end of a space to another, and then without doing anything, type divide by whatever number of boxes you want, and it'll evenly space an array of boxes along that span. And now you can see I'm quickly creating a three-dimensional array using the multiply and divide options with the move tool. It's always best to, whenever you're using the array, to be doing it within a group, because once you get hundreds of these objects through an array command, it's kind of annoying if you have to go through and select them all to make them into a group. This array command works the same for the rotate tool as well. So if I rotate this object to here, and without doing anything, I can type a multiplier until it wraps all the way around that entire circle. And you can quickly start to see how you can make some really cool complex shapes using the array tool. And for example, I just did this again, but I actually made that object a component. So because it's a component and I copy it, now if I edit one of these objects, it'll edit all of them. And you can see how you can start playing around with different shapes and different geometry to make some very unique stuff. And I don't show it here, but just know that whenever you're editing a series of components like this, if you ever want to make one of the components unique, and in other words, change it without editing the others, you can always right-click on it and just select Make Unique. And then if you edit that component, it won't alter any of the other ones. The next tool that I want to show you real quick, and I kind of forgot to show it earlier, but is the scale tool. And you can see I just used the push-pull tool, but I can also achieve that same shape by using the scale tool on that group. The biggest thing to understand whenever you're using the scale tool is that it also will scale the texture on that object, which typically will make you want to use the push-pull tool over the scale tool. So here, for instance, I'm adding material to this object so you can see what the scale tool does to it. The material was a little bit small, so I wanted to edit the material and scale it up a little bit. So you can see here, when I use the push-pull tool, the material actually works with the extrusion, versus if I use the scale tool, it'll stretch out the material that was mapped on that object. Really, this only matters if you're trying to get accurate material information in SketchUp. If you're going to render your model in something like Lumion, this scaling objects doesn't really matter, because you'll just be applying a new material map inside Lumion. The next thing I want to show you is the Follow Me tool. And just real quick, for this to work, you need a curve and a face that acts as a profile to be extruded along that curve. So you'll select your curve, and then you'll choose the Follow Me tool. And then if you click on that face, it's going to extrude it along that path. And this is really useful for everything from handrails to just about anything that you want a profile to be extruded along. Now I want to show you how to scale your SketchUp model using the tape measure tool. If you select the tape measure tool, typically what it's going to do is going to give you guidelines. But if you hit Control, you'll see that little indicator will go away. And if you click from one point of your model to the next, and then enter in the length that it needs to be, and then it'll ask if you want to resize the entire model. Yes, you'll see that it'll resize the model to that length. And you can also use this same process for scaling a group. So if you're inside the group, you do the same thing. It'll actually just scale that object. And this is just a really handy tip if you're importing things into SketchUp from Revit or any other software, and you want to make sure the scale is correct. Another handy tip that I didn't realize until a long time after using SketchUp is how to change the field of view. So you'll notice when you're in a tight space like this, the default field of view in SketchUp is like a 35mm focal length. To change this, as long as you're in the perspective mode, if you click on the zoom icon, down the right hand corner, you'll see where it says field of view, and you can enter whatever degree focus you want in that box. So now you can see I have a 60-degree field of view, so it's a much wider lens, and then back to 35, and then back to 80 to a super wide lens. And this you'll find will help you get into some of the tight spaces in your model without having to worry about fighting the walls and edges. But typically, I think if you're doing a rendering or any kind of perspective view, I think 35 degrees is going to be kind of close to what the human eye will see. The next trick I want to show you is a tool in the sandbox toolbar. It's the Draper Tool. And what this is going to allow you to do is flatten any kind of line work that you have in SketchUp. And you'll find that you need to do this a lot, especially if you're importing information from AutoCAD, like a site plan with a bunch of topography lines, and you need to get all of that information on the same Z level. So for this example, I just drew this really cruddy curve that kind of jumps from different Z levels and is really messy. But if you position this above a plane and then select that curve and then choose the Draper tool and then click on the face below, it's going to project that curve directly onto that face. And you'll see that for this example, I have some overlap, but essentially it'll take all those points directly or straight down onto that face. And it'll automatically create faces on that plane. And so you can go ahead and extrude using the push-pull tool. So you can see I could quickly create like a curb on a street or anything along those lines using the Draper tool. The next tool we'll look at is the section tool. And I think I wanted to show this because I feel like I'm cutting sections all the time when I'm using SketchUp. And you can see on this toolbar, you have the option to hide your section cut. You have the option to turn on and off section cut and the section poche. But if you wanted to add multiple section cuts to the same object, the way to do it is to group the first section cut with the object. And then if you're outside that group, you can apply another section cut. And now you can see how you're kind of starting to create a section box of sorts, because there isn't a native section box tool built into SketchUp. So this is kind of the workaround that you'll use if you're trying to make multiple section cuts for a diagram or a drawing. The next tool I want to look at is the geolocation feature. And this is going to allow you to pull topographical information and satellite information from pretty much anywhere you want. So for instance here, I'm just directly over Marvin Hall on the KU campus. And if I import this into my model, you're going to get the accurately aligned satellite image. And if you click the terrain button in the location toolbar, you'll see that it also gives you the topography information and the elevation heights. And something that I like to do whenever I'm using this information from geolocation is add contour lines. And to do this, what you'll do is just explode the terrain that was imported from the geolocation. And I went ahead and turned off the material so you could see this better. But then in order to add the contours, there are plugins that allow you to do this in just one click. But the way to do it in just a default SketchUp workflow is to draw a plane and then copy that plane straight up to whatever height increment that you want. So for this, I just did 5 feet. And then I just multiplied that plane. And if I select everything and explode everything, and then select everything and do intersect faces with selection, that's cutting these planes through that topography that I got. So now if I delete the excess of these planes, you can see that we have topography lines or contours on this surface at 5-foot intervals. And then you can see with the texture back on. The next toolbar I want to look at is the shadow tool. And this one's like very straightforward. Obviously you can change the time of year and the time of day. But if you go into the default tray, you also have a couple more options, such as this checkbox that says use sun for shading. And what this is going to do is it's going to light up the faces of your objects based on the sun's location. This isn't necessarily casting shadows, but it is kind of illuminating your model in a different way. And sometimes I find that that's actually easier for me to see what I'm working on whenever I'm modeling in SketchUp. So now I want to look at a cool thing that I like to use with the Scenes tab. This is kind of combining styles and themes in order to create different working views for you when you're working in SketchUp. So what you'll do is you'll deselect everything in the scenes except for the style and fog and shadow settings. And then what you can do is set up whatever style you want to be. For instance, this could be my working style. So if I create this scene, I can name it working. And now I have this style saved to my scene. It's not saving the camera view, the layers, hidden geometry, anything like that. It's simply just remembering the style information. So now I can make another one. And this one I'll just call hidden line. So I'll create another scene, rename it hidden line. And I'll deselect everything except for the style and fog and shadow settings. And then let's make one more. And the last one that I want to make is going to be the rendered view. So it's going to have like a sky and a ground plane. And then you're also going to be able to see the materials on the object. So I'll just create a new scene and call this rendered. And once again, only keep the style and fog and shadow settings selected. And now you can see the top left-hand corner. Each one of these tabs is one click, and I can swap very quickly between different styles. And this is super useful, especially if you're presenting work inside your SketchUp. So if you're sitting down with at a desk group with your professor, and they want to see a hidden line version of your view, you can simply click the hidden line, and with very little effort, you have that style selected. The last thing I want to look at is setting up shortcuts in SketchUp. I think this is super necessary for efficient and quick modeling. To get to your shortcut window, you go to your window tab and then preferences, and you'll find the shortcuts in the preferences tab. Here you can see I have a shortcut set up for my rectangle tool. I made mine Shift R. So I pointed this one out because I feel like making rectangles is one of the most common things that you'll find yourself doing. So having a hotkey to that is really efficient because you can do Shift R and then P for push tool, and then go from there. Another really important one is to have edit make group assigned to a shortcut. So I have it set as G. So if I triple click something and then just click G, it'll automatically group that. It's important to have this as a shortcut because you'll find right after you model something, you want to group it almost instantly. But here you just see I'm Shift R to rectangle, P for push tool, O for the offset, and then just repeat. And those are some of the commands that you'll find yourself using the most whenever you're modeling. Another really cool shortcut that a lot of people don't know about is the isolate or hide rest to model. So if you go to your window, your preferences, back to your shortcuts, if you search hide, you'll find view, component, edit, hide, rest to model. If you add a hotkey to this, mine is Alt-I. Whenever you're inside a group or a component and you hit whatever that shortcut is, Alt-I for me, it will isolate this object and hide the rest of your model. This is very useful if you're in a very heavy model and you want to just focus on one object. And if you turn it on once, the next time you go into a group, it'll remember and it'll automatically hide the rest of the model until you hit the shortcut again. But yeah, that's just very brief overview of shortcuts. And I think the more you use SketchUp, the more you'll realize what tools you use the most. So I think it's always smart to add a shortcut to those tools just to make yourself as fast of a 3D modeler as possible. So I know this was only scratching the surface of how to use SketchUp, but I hope it gives you a better understanding of some of the quick tips that you can use for more efficient modeling. And always remember that YouTube or just Google in general is a great resource for any question you have about SketchUp. Anytime I'm trying to figure out how to do something, I'll type in the question exactly how I'm thinking, and typically I'll find something that gets me close to where I want to be. Yeah, I hope this helps out. Thanks for watching.